So, welcome back and hello if you are new, and thank you so much for tuning in to what is going to be my final video of 2019. Continuing where we left off last week, we're now down to the final 10 of my albums of 2019. So without further ado, let's dive right back in with Bring Me the Horizon's Ammo. Now, this is definitely my most played album since it was released on January 25th, coincidentally my birthday. It's an absolutely fantastic record that explores so many different sonic landscapes that the band, and I think a lot of metal bands, would actually be quite scared to kind of tread into. But it also makes sure that none of it sounds out of place with Bring Me the Horizon's new sound. And I think it's such a bold, creative leap forward that the band should be praised for it. I was always a fan of the earlier sort of stuff, but it was like Sempiternal and That's the Spirit where I just thought the band had kind of lost it. And it's with Ammo that I've kind of rekindled this fire with Bring Me the Horizon, and they're not afraid of what people think of their sound, which has single-handedly reinvented them to become one of the biggest rock bands, well, one of the biggest current rock bands on the planet. Deserted is the perfect representation of the band's huge sound, but also represents the rotting elements of death metal, but allow the band to have somewhat of a mass appeal. So for example, if they were supporting maybe Lamb of God, they wouldn't necessarily sound too out of place, and it wouldn't sound too full on. And that's the genius with Gatecreeper. It allows for mass appeal, and perhaps for the less initiated in the world of death metal, kind of a gateway, really, almost like Obituary. The riffs are simplistic, powerful, but most importantly, catchy. And I think there is an element of crossover in Gatecreeper's sound, which is brilliant because it allows them to tour with various different bands without necessarily being too out of the box. By that I mean they can cross over to so many different audiences and really expand their sound. Their songwriting is perfect, the dynamics hit incredibly hard, and this is only their second full length. So imagine what they can do when they get to sort of album number 4 or number 5 and they really hit their stride. Honestly, I think the sky is the limit for Gatecreeper. Now, if you were looking for your most harrowing album of the year, then look no further than Full of Hell's Weeping Choir, as one of the most caustic LPs that I've heard in a very long time. And it's only 25 minutes long. You might think that 25 minutes is kind of not really getting much for your money's worth, but when you have a sound that is as vicious as Full of Hell's, 25 minutes is way more than long enough. There is no one out there, personally for me, like Full of Hell. They combine elements of noise, grindcore, death metal, even doom, but it's one of those things, almost like a car crash. You don't want to look at it, but you feel somehow drawn to look at it. Weeping Choir is the most vicious album I've heard this year, and please do not finish 2019 without taking 25 minutes out to experience this nightmarish sound. Atmosphere is without a doubt Into Arma's most devastating weapon on Sulphur English. It has this sense of nostalgia, you know, kind of reminding me of Altars of Madness, Morbid Angel, but then you've got sections which move into like Coloured Sands, Gorguts area, or potentially Pink Floyd. And these are such different bands, but when you listen to the album, I'm sure you'll know exactly what I mean. And it's this strange oxymoron of the band being able to sound incredibly airy and very light and floaty, but also having a really tethered, down-to-earth sound. There is a lot of silence on this album. There's a lot of, open room where the riffs are really able to breathe, or the drums on Howling Lands, for example, have that tribal element to them. Sulphur English is a fantastic way to really dive into what is a very kaleidoscopic sound. Deciding to forego the previous conceptual arcs that the band have put together, A Dawn to Fear kind of represents more of an immediate sound, I think, for the band. And although it is an hour and 10 minutes long, I think, it has such a scope inside these 8 songs that you just completely lose yourself every time you listen to them. And I think that it's very much down to the emotional weight of the lyrics, but also the musicality on there. And for me, I do have a special attachment with this album because it was, well, Lights on the Hill was the first track I listened to after the passing of my grandfather. And it really reminds me of that in an instant. And I think that's a testament to Cult of Luna, if anything, because they are such an emotional force. And it really does bring you back to that moment instantly. It's without a doubt the most contemplative of this list and really throws you into the emotional eye of the storm. And if you can get through it, it's a fantastic, fantastic album. One of the things that I knocked Thy Art Is Murder for earlier this year was that, yes, it's a great album, but it didn't have enough of a change. It just felt kind of like the band were doing the same thing again. However, with Fit for an Autopsy, there is a definite change. There's mature songwriting and mature subject matter, but most importantly, the band, I think, have understood what their sound is. And this is really where I love seeing bands hit their stride. The biggest thing to take away from The Sea of Tragic Beasts is that the songs speak for themselves. This is a band who have understood exactly where they are and what their sound is, and have just decimated the competition. Now, Opeth's movement into the world of old man prog was, of course, met with a lot of grumbling from the metal community. And whereas some of their previous releases, I'm talking Heritage, Pale Communion, and a little bit Sorceress, were somewhat foggy, it seems that the smoke has finally cleared for Incauda Venenum. Incauda Venenum is bigger, more cinematic, and creates a really brilliant marriage of the heavier spectrum, not the sound, the spectrum of Opeth, and then the lighter, more prog rock oriented sound. It's expansive but not waffly, and it has direction instead of meandering, which I think some of the previous albums did somewhat. If you're looking for a cinematic experience, then look no further than the introduction of Livet Tregad, which, has these like little voices which follow you throughout the album, and it's this, ebb and flow of kind of understanding exactly how a story works that makes Incauda Venenum such an essential piece of the Opeth puzzle. One of the most despondent bands on the planet. One of the things I love about Cattle Decapitation is their sense of not compromising for anyone. And Death Atlas, with a brand new lineup, is a reinvigorated Cattle Decapitation, and they're experimenting with new ideas, but also capitalizing on what makes them such a great band. There is an element of the cinematic and these chapters that the band was talking about that really kind of governs Cattle Decapitation's sound. I also think that it's important to understand that Cattle Decapitation are one of the most extreme bands out there, and to see this level of popularity for a band with a sound that's this abrasive is truly incredible, and that's one of the reasons that it's ended up on this list. Tool released an album that is as much an odyssey as a record, and I absolutely love Fear Inoculum. It's one of those albums where you can just hit play and get lost in, and every single time I listen to it, it has this weird sense of relaxation to it. This is exactly what I was hoping to get from Tool, and I think what most Tool fans wanted, because I absolutely adore this record and I cannot get enough of it. I must be on my 200th listen or something like that. And there's still things that I'm discovering. Finally, Tool are no longer a meme and have returned with one of the strongest albums of the year. However, all of these albums on this list have been quite neck and neck. If you've watched my Album of the Year videos before, you'll know that my Album of the Year may not necessarily be the record I've listened to the most, but the one that I engaged with the most. It is without a doubt the biggest undertaking of his career and features 3 drummers, an entire choir, an orchestra, literally everything you could want to get the perfect album. And I really do urge you to watch the documentary because it makes you fall in love with the album even more. This album spans so many different genres and different eras of Devin Townsend's life as a musician. You've got death metal, new age, pop, country, musicals, a John Williams style. I remember going to the cinema and watching those John Williams films and hearing that soundtrack, and it would raise the hairs, on the back of my neck. And every time I listen to Requiem, I have this childhood sense of wonder about it. And even though I know exactly what's coming, it just makes you think of all the big questions in life. And it's his magnum opus. It is truly fantastic. Now, I also wanted to include my Album of the Year, which is a non-metal album. And it's Billie Eilish's When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go?
Why don't you run from me? What are you wondering? What do you know?
The reason for this is I love the sense of darkness on this album. I think that it adopts that sense of evil that is seen so much in rock and metal, but has put it into a mainstream pop idea. And it's a very kind of bare bones approach. A lot of the time Billie's whispering and there's not really much that you can hear other than her voice. And it's really small dynamics that are kind of layered on top of each other that create such a big sound for what is quite minimalist as an idea. And there's also a really kind of off-kilter sense to it. There's this kind of Stepford Wives idea in there where there's, it's almost like a smile, but it's sort of slightly cracked and has this slight Twilight Zone feel to it. I think Billie should also be praised for her use of samples as well. There are some really unorthodox samples on here. I've been watching a fair amount of interviews, and there are sections where you can hear a stapler on Bury a Friend, or there was a small section where she was getting her teeth done at, the dentist or something, and she's included that in a track. And I like the fact that there's this kind of weirdness, this darkness that's kind of infiltrating pop. Because for me, pop has always been pink, candy, sugar-coated, good times. And I think it's necessary that we have someone like Billie Eilish. So she is my non-metal album of the year. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but I actually work as a rock metal PR now. And I try not to cover any of the bands that I'm working, but I wanted to kind of have a few words to say about my favourite campaign that I worked this year. And that was Blood Incantation's Hidden History of the Human Race. It combines all the best elements of atheist, death, immolation, and demolish. I love the sense of escapism that this album has, and even though I've worked this album and I've been listening to it a lot, like a serious amount. We get albums a lot earlier, in order to send them out to press. And I'm still listening to this, and I absolutely love it. But it being my favourite album aside, it was also some of my biggest achievements that I got as a PR on this record. So it does have a real kind of soft spot for me there as well. Thank you so much for watching any of my videos in 2019. If you've liked, subscribed, commented, added me on Instagram, had a chat, I'm so grateful, honestly. Every time I do this, I'm always blown away by the level of support that you guys have given me. And I'm literally maybe 50 subscribers away from 5,000, which I never thought I would be. So if you could share this and ask anyone to give it a like or subscribe, that would be absolutely fantastic. But most importantly, I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a fantastic New Year. And I hope that you've really enjoyed another year of watching me talk about albums and various different other things in my living room, because I absolutely love doing it. So take care, friends, and I will see you guys in the next decade. Alright, peace out.